Okay, so the comment was just like, I'm that kind of perfectionist, but I don't think it's worth giving something to my supervisor until it's as good as I can possibly make it. It's a waste of his time.
I can fix the errors.
You can fix the errors that you know. Okay, thank you so much for asking this, because one of the things that happens at this stage is that you want to pass in writing that has correctable gaps, holes, or problems, because even if people have been super spacious and gappy and haven't actually responded at all, one of the things that they want is to give feedback that you respond to. So this is also a piece of like trying to get them to give you less feedback, because people who've given feedback are sometimes pissed off if you don't respond to the feedback. And again, the dissertation is this thing that's in process. So the dissertation that you feel completely done with might be a dissertation that they still want to give feedback on and see you make changes. And it's not just like so that they feel like they've had an effect. A more positive way to think about it is, this is one of the only times in your life as an academic where you have people who are really present with you in terms of how your thinking is, in a way that can open new spaces that you might not have predicted about yourself. After you finish the PhD, pretty much you never again have this space where there are 4 people who are actually reading your stuff, asking you questions about it, and suggesting you move in directions that you don't yet know and can't predict about yourself. So the kind of like tactical, cold-hearted way is to be like, you need to give your committee enough space that they can make suggestions for alteration that you can make so that their ego is fulfilled and they feel that they were doing a good job. The more abundant, generous thing is, this is a place where what the committee is for is not just to stamp that they think you did a good job. It's what they're there for, and what you can appreciate as the only last time you'll have this is that it's a space where you can give something that you haven't yet completely wrapped up and see what might emerge from it.
But is it not more valuable to have them comment on things that I can't anticipate and help me make the work better than I can make it myself, as opposed to just leaving gaps that, I don't know how to write this idea or to defend this particular argument.
Right. No, yes, thank you. So it's not that you want, and you're also like, you're coming very to the end, right? So you're in a different stage than people who are going to be defending in a year. So for you, you might want to be like, I'm doing this, I'm buttoning this up. So I'm not saying leave an obvious gap, right? Like, don't mention someone that you know your committee will want you to talk about so that they feel a little ego stroke that they told you. No, it's that giving committee members or giving your supervisor pieces of writing that you don't feel completely buttoned down about is leaving some space for a kind of collaboration. So the analogy that I often think of is like, I used to be a bike mechanic, so that if I was helping someone, I used to train people to work on their own bikes. And if I was helping someone work on their bike, I would stand, on the same side with them, and we would look together at the problem. So it's a moment where the dissertation is the bike, and you have an expert mechanic who has a slightly different perspective, who is helping you think about like what might happen. You're actually going to do the work. It's going to be you who responds. They can't predict that. That's one of the beautiful things of being a dissertation supervisor, is over and over again experiencing that students are so much more interesting than you are and that do things that are so much more innovative and that are so much more tied in with the state of the field. Like, this is one of the reasons that we love supervising people, right? It's really exciting and moving. And so having that space is, so it's not, you're not trying to be like.
I like the way that you talk about it as, leaving space for collaboration.
Yeah, it's still you, but it's like, yeah. Okay, so we're at 4:00, and so I think that we're not going to, I think I'm just going to tell you about how to do back outlining for your dissertation, and we won't actually do it if that is okay. I'll tell you what it is, and then if you're like, no, I really want to do that right now, we can do it. This is the first time that I'm giving this workshop, and so my sense of timing is not totally there. Usually when I give workshops, I like to know like how long everything takes. So, okay, back outlining what the dissertation is. So this is a mode where I advocate physically printing out everything you have that might be in the dissertation. So even as someone who wants to conserve paper and trees, this is a moment to concretize what you have. Back outlining is a practice where you read the thing backwards. So this can be that you read the paragraphs. So starting at the last paragraph, you read that whole paragraph. If you're back outlining a chapter with a lot of detail, you can read the sentences backwards. And you write down what's actually there. So if you're in this space where you have a lot of different things, you're just writing down, what does that paragraph argue, or what does it do? What data does it present? What literature does it summarize? And what back outlining gives you is an outline, a map of the dissertation, based not on reading it from start to finish in a way that you're always going to be filling in the stuff that you know you meant to say there, or the literature you meant to talk about. It does this interesting flip where, and people who, Jana is a writing, many of you study and teach writing. For whatever reason, this does something different to our brains, so we can just look at what's actually happening there. What it allows us to do is see what we haven't done, or see connections that we couldn't see before. So sometimes I back outline just on a piece of paper, sometimes a big piece of paper. Often I back outline onto note cards, because one of the surprising things that happens at the stage of dissertation that all of you will be at this year is that you sometimes will radically alter what the dissertation looks like, how it's organized, how it hangs together. So you need to concretize and lateralize your understanding of what your dissertation is. So if you do this back outlining where for each new move that you're making, each new step in the argument, each new summarization of a body of literature, you have a note card. You can put them up on a wall in your house that can be your dissertation wall, tape, and then color code them. So you can have color coding based on the theme that you're doing, whether it's your own argument or summarizing someone else's. So whatever is the salient thing for you, you make colors and you make a scheme, and then you look. So like when I did this with my dissertation, I was like, look, that's so interesting. Here are all these red bits here that are about, the place of embodied knowledge in political transformation. And then there's a long time where there's no red bits, and then there's a bunch of red bits here and a bunch of red bits here. So what that did for me was like, okay, that's actually a thing that there should be red bits in every one of these chapters, because it's so prevalent in these 3 chapters that it's weird to have one that doesn't have anything talking about that. Turns out that's a major theme in my dissertation that I did not perceive until I spatialized it that way. So various things might happen. And you can go in and be like, you can have cards where you have things I have not written yet that I need to write. So a note card is a good size for this kind of thing, because then you can have just a stack, or you can take the note card off the wall, tape it next to your computer monitor, and be like, what am I doing? I'm explaining this thing that I haven't explained yet.
Can you just go back one step? So the back outline, you're sort of reading the sort of final paragraphs, presumably the right way around, but starting at the end and working your way.
Yeah, so you read the final paragraph of what you think is your final chapter of the dissertation, the paragraph above that, the paragraph above that. So you read the chapter backwards, and then you read the whole dissertation backwards, and you write down what's happening, just descriptively. Yeah.
Has anybody done that?
I have for essays.
For essays?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be helpful to visualize it and see, or make those connections between, or even figure out the line of argument, or whoa, what am I most saying with this piece?
Yeah. Often at an essay scale, it's like, you know the different things. Sometimes not, right? Like if it's complicated, but don't you find that?
I haven't really used it as a maybe.
like 20 pages, 35 pages, you can kind of hold that in your head. You can't actually hold the dissertation entirely in your head. So this might not be the way to do it, but making some technology where you do it. So some people, like one of my students, Sarah, really loved working with Scrivener, which is a modality online that lets you move things around and it maps things for you. Other people use like Evernote has capacities to have like things nested in it. So it doesn't have to be physically doing things. I am personally a fan of using the computer as a tool for production, not organization, because of the phenomenology of the computer as a constantly moving stream of text that you can just highlight all of it and delete. So I think that there's something good about materializing the work. And also you can see like how many pages have you actually written? How great is that?
Can I just ask a more practical question? I find I have a very strong revulsion to reading my own writing, particularly because writing it, I spend so much time rereading the same damn sentence before I write the next sentence. So does this help with that sort of ability to attend to your own work?
I find that it helps if you have any revulsion toward your writing, because your writing becomes slightly strange to you. Yeah, it's you kind of don't remember, and it does that a little bit. And just also printing it out sometimes is different. Yeah. Viviana asks, how long would it take to do that for an entire dissertation? Like you want to give it a good afternoon, like three 45-minute units at least. Yeah.
Is it helpful to do it from the state that I am right now, where I've written an introduction because I'm at the very beginning stages of everything? So is that I can see the value of doing this backwards.
Yeah.
So that it sort of compartmentalizes each section as opposed to I'm reading it through and I expect a progression.
Yeah.
So is it a useful thing to do as you go along, or is it better to do it when you're finished?
You've done the data collection already in your 3 years? Do you do?
Let's say yes.
So this I think is most useful when you've generated some stuff. Okay. And I think that this is part of a sort of overall thing of disaggregating the creative part of you as a writer from the editor part of you as a writer. So give yourself time to generate a lot of stuff. And this is basically an editorial eye going back in, right? But you have to separate them, because the editor is terrible at writing, but really useful and really good. And you want to welcome and love the editor. Just they can't write anything. They're terrible at that. They can just tell you if it was good what you wrote. Yeah. But you probably do have more stuff that you might use in the dissertation. And especially if you haven't looked at it for a while, this can be a good technology to go back through and just read things and see what's there.
It's really appealing to me.
Yeah.
I've got the wall in place in my mind.
Yeah. And I think the note cards on the wall, it's very pleasing. And there's a question on chat saying this strategy might be most helpful for monograph dissertations, whereas mine is a series of studies. So would I suggest backdrafting each study? Yeah. So you can go back and just do this on a smaller scale for each study that you're doing. Even when you're doing a sort of publication-based dissertation, you still are expected in the introduction and conclusion to talk about the thematic continuity. For almost every department that I know of, you have to have some account of how this is a sort of has something connected to it. So that's the place that this strategy can help give you an understanding of where your thematic work is. You might already know, like you might already know what's happening, and that's cool. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the title question. So does everyone have a title for their dissertation right now? Okay, so I think everyone needs to have a title for their dissertation. And so let's just come up with titles. So even if you already have a title, you can come up with another title. Titles for dissertations often have a colon. There's some data which you can look up that says that titles that are very descriptive get cited more. Dissertations that have very descriptive, specific titles get cited more. So many of you will have publications that are, interesting, like quirky, poetic, beautiful titles in a journal article. Many will have an interesting, poetic, quirky title, quote, as the dissertation beginning of the, you want to have something for a dissertation because it's going to be archived in libraries that's like super descriptive and that positions you in relation to a discipline. And this is partially about having people be able to find your work, and it's partially about laying intellectual claim to your work. So you want to have a title that, or at least some versions of the title that are kind of boring. So what I'd like to start with is just say something about your topic. So does anyone have a title that they're like, I'm really good with my title, I don't want to even do this?
Kind of, because I'm so bad at titles that I found one.
Good, what is it? What's your title?
A political strategy for the affirmation of women and investigation into Canadian socialist feminist political practice.
Okay, a political strategy. Say it.
For the affirmation of women.
For the affirmation of women. Is that a quote from somewhere, or is that a?
No.
Okay. Then the colon.
Colon. An investigation into Canadian socialist feminist political practice.
Investigation into Canadian feminist, socialist feminist political practice. Okay, good. So one way that we can think about that title, so lovely, good work, is it's also two things that are pretty general, right? So we can have, so try having a general thing and then get way more specific about which socialists, which times, which places, where in Canada. So everyone start with something that's like a super general version of your dissertation, colon, super specific version of your dissertation. Does that make sense? Can I just read you a couple from the chat? Okay, so Stacy says, I'm pretty sure about mine. Multiple modernisms north of the 49th parallel, colon, nationalism, sovereignty, and decolonization in First Nations and settler art from 1970 to 1995. Excellent. Christina says, women, labor, and the Inuit parka, the history of sewing in Kivalak, Nunavut. Okay, then self-critical, which I'm not going to read. That's also a really great one. Okay, so anyone want to share one from in here?
Share mine, because I want people to pick it apart. It's Indian in quotes under the law, colon, an analysis of Acadian Métis identity in the post-Daniels era.
Nice.
I don't want it to be just nice, though. I want it to be really good. Oh, good.
Yeah, no, I like it. I say nice about things that I really like. Okay. Anyone else have one? Yeah.
It's where the city enters, colon, exploration into the potential of discipline planning.
What years? In 2000. Yeah, really specific. So you want it to be specific like that, because otherwise if someone's searching, they're like city planning Toronto, but they're interested in 1923, right? So you make it like.
I just rewrote mine recently because I had it like kind of more like I think what you're saying a journal article is, and I made it more boring, and now I'm more and more liking the boring one. So it's punishing revenge porn, colon, legal interpretations of and responses to non-consensual intimate image sharing in Canada. I guess I could put some years.
Yeah, it would be good to put years for the former one. Viviana says, gentrification in Cape Town, colon, race, urban renewal, and the right to the city. And I would also, for the specific version, this is disciplinarily specific, right? Like not all disciplines do this, but you can have years or eras, right? So gentrification and the right to the city in the post-apartheid era, right? That situates things. Anyone else want to give us one of theirs?
Yeah, the problem with care unsettling care through the work histories of recovering carers in Ontario.
3 cares.
Okay. Oh,
Might
yeah,
be 2. I think,
yeah.
were there 3?
Oh yeah, you're right, 3. So that could be,
Yeah, so notice like sometimes it's like, it's
yeah.
good to have multiple care, but maybe just 2,
Yeah,
right?
I can cut it back to 2.
Okay, let's do another. So quality of abundance, did you have any specificity or changes that happened in yours?
I could put the date somewhere.
Okay.
But I'd have to think about it for a long time because I'm so bad at titles. Like,
Yeah. Well, and it's like the question of titles can be really, it's hard. Do you have one?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So mine's caring to include, calling a relational study of the everyday life and care of adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families in Ontario. I'm looking at post 2008, so I guess.
2008 to 2018. Mm-hmm. So other things that you can do with title working are that I just encourage you to just be playful around. So limits are your friend, right? So you can say, now I'm making a title, and I really do encourage you to just play with titles when you're not sure what you're doing. Now I'm making a title that is only 10 words long. Now I'm making a title that begins with a song lyric before the colon and then gets super academic. Now I'm making a title that is like, uses all the buzzwords of my discipline. And now I'm making a title that uses none of the buzzwords of my discipline. So you can just
making one that uses the word care.
Now
9 times.
75 times. I was at a protest about the cuts to ODSP the other day, and there was someone whose sign was like, fuck, fuckity, fuck this fuck. I was like, it's very evocative. Good. So the greatest thing about having a title, there's 2 great things about having a title. One is that when someone says, your uncle says like, what are you doing? And you say, I'm writing a dissertation. It's called, right? You have something immediately to say, right? And then you can be like, oh, and this is what it's about. Another thing that's great about having a title is that often people don't have titles, and then it's like the night before they're supposed to turn their thing in, and they're like, I don't have a title. And then you end up with a title like my MA title, which was non-propositional knowledge, an exploration of heterodox. I can't even remember. It was so bad. And it was just because it was the night before I had to turn it in. So you want to have some time where you're like thinking about it and have space for it. And it's also that you're going to be applying for postdocs either this year or next year. And so you need to be able to say, my dissertation titled examined. So it gives it just this kind of reality, and it's one of the things that cues people around you that you are serious and you are finishing. Okay, formatting. I really encourage you to start right away putting the dissertation in the format that it needs to be in later. So this is formatting of the bibliography, the page margins, the way you're going to do the citations, the specifics of so just do not start in a month before you have to turn it in doing this. There's not actually a reason to write anything about the dissertation. It's a very particular thing. In our department, for reasons I don't totally understand, we just made a really firm cut that dissertations can only be 250 pages long, including bibliography. The margins are wider on a dissertation, even though now they're not actually bound. It used to be that the margin was 1.5 inches on the left side because they got bound in the library and you needed to be able to read them. Now they're all electronic, but you still have this super wide left margin. So there have been times where people are like, good, I'm done with my dissertation. And then they put the correct margins in and all of a sudden they're like, I gotta cut 40 pages. Or I have to like have a fight with my committee and the department about how long this is. So just know right away how long your stuff actually is. This is partially also about managing people's expectations so that you don't have someone who's getting grumpy because your thesis is longer than they want to read. So look at what the norm is for your discipline and then decide how long your thesis is going to be based on that norm. and format it accordingly.
And how are we supposed to know in new departments, in new programs?
Good question. Look to cognate departments. So, so like sociology is probably a pretty good cognate department to social work. So you can say oldest sociology department in Canada, they have a limit of 250 pages. So I'm going to aim for my dissertation to be 246 pages. Yeah. And what often will happen is if you're writing, you'll write a lot more than that. And so again, there's this quality of abundance where not everything has to go in the dissertation. So you can just take the chapter that doesn't fit anymore and publish it as a standalone paper. And you want to be doing that anywhere. You can publish it as a series of blog posts, you know, right? So just feel like that's great. I can always write more than I thought I ever could. Okay, so
do you have any other thoughts on how parts of it hang together, or to getting to that stage of, or is even starting to, or printing them out today and thinking, oh, all of this is going to fit together?
Yeah. So how to hang together the whole dissertation, how to see what's happening with it. So there's a part of this also that is about meeting the expectations of the discipline. So you all are much more creative actually than the strictures of the dissertation as it's been done in your discipline. And there are reasons to not necessarily push or challenge. There are times to push and challenge the bounds of the discipline. And you have to be strategic and careful about if you decide to do that in the context of the dissertation. So in many departments, in many disciplines, people expect an introduction, a literature review, a methodological chapter, 3 findings chapters, a conclusion. And if you do that, they know what they're looking at. Like I was trained in an interdisciplinary program where there weren't any norms like that. And so people just did all kinds of things. Like they did just random things. And I had to really learn when I moved into a discipline, into a philosophy department, what the standard was, because I kept having colleagues get really freaked out looking at a thesis that didn't meet those, you know, it would just be like, I'm just going to talk about this stuff. So if your discipline has pretty strict boundaries around those things, there's not really a reason to not be like, when I turn this into, when I turn this into a book for Fernwood, or when I turn this into papers that I'm going to submit, I'm just going to cut all of this stuff because no one in those forms needs to know. But your external examiners are going to be like, what's the methodology, right? Let me know where it is. So there's part of it that's just like making stuff very easy for your current committee, but also there's an internal, for most of us, there's an internal examiner, someone from Carleton, but from another department, and an external examiner, someone from another school. So you want them to feel like they know the map. So when you're looking at what you've got so far, one of the things is to recognize that feature about yourself as you're always doing the same, you're kind of always doing the same thing. So probably there's parts of stuff you've already written, including chapters that you think are different chapters, where there's actually one thing that you can take from those different starts, and that can come together into a chapter that's about like theorizing care, or whatever the thing is that you're theorizing. So letting the thing show you what you've actually done can help you ground what you're doing. We're coming up on 40 minutes, so we're about to get cut off again. How many people would like a break now, or would you like to just keep going into the timeline stuff and end at 5? Anyone want a break? Okay, so onliners, we're just going to stop and then come right back.